Naira's skin tingled as she materialized in the narrow alley, her molecular structure settling into Earth's atmosphere. The midnight air carried unfamiliar scents, exhaust fumes, rotting garbage, and something else, something that made her heart race unexpectedly. She dismissed it as mission jitters, though deep down she knew better. Reaching into her jacket pocket, she retrieved the holographic data chip containing her target's information. James Morrison, 32, Humanitarian Aid Coordinator. The projection showed a man with gentle brown eyes and a strong jaw, his expression thoughtful as he worked with refugee children in a crowded camp. Something about his image made her pause longer than necessary. "Focus," she whispered to herself, tucking away the chip. The Stellarian High Command had been clear, Morrison's humanitarian work was getting too close to uncovering their hidden operations on Earth. His aid missions kept crossing paths with their resource extraction sites, and he was starting to ask questions. Questions that could expose everything. Naira moved through the shadows of London streets, her enhanced vision cutting through the darkness. Her target lived in a modest flat above a bookshop, and according to her intelligence, he would be returning from a late-night meeting soon. The perfect opportunity to strike. But as she scaled the building's fire escape, that strange sensation returned, a warmth spreading through her core, making her fingers tremble slightly. "No," she muttered. "Not now." The timing couldn't be worse. Her species' mating cycle came once every 5 years, and hers was due. She'd hoped to complete this mission before the symptoms began. Movement caught her eye. Morrison was approaching, his tall frame easily visible under the streetlights. He carried a worn leather messenger bag, probably filled with work documents. What caught Naira's attention, however, was how he stopped to help an elderly woman who had dropped her groceries. There was no hesitation, no looking around to see if anyone was watching. He simply knelt down and began gathering scattered oranges, sharing a warm smile with the woman. Naira's hand moved to her weapon, a neural disruptor designed to look like an Earth-made pistol. One shot, and it would appear like a heart attack. Clean. Untraceable. But her fingers wouldn't cooperate. The warmth in her core had spread, making her breath come faster. She watched as Morrison bid the elderly woman goodbye, then climbed the steps to his flat. Through his windows, she could see him moving about, hanging up his coat, feeding a small cat she hadn't known about, preparing what appeared to be tea. Such simple actions, yet they held her transfixed. "Command to Shadow 7, her communicator chirped softly. "Status report." Naira swallowed hard, forcing her voice to remain steady. "Target acquired. Proceeding with surveillance to determine optimal execution window." "Understood. Time is of the essence, Shadow 7. The human's latest project brings him dangerously close to Site B." "Acknowledged," she responded, ending the transmission. But she remained motionless, watching as Morrison settled into an armchair with his tea and a book. The cat curled in his lap, and he absently stroked its fur while reading. The domesticity of the scene stirred something in her she'd never felt before. When her people chose her for this mission, they'd cited her perfect record, her unwavering focus, her ability to complete assignments without hesitation or error. They hadn't known, couldn't have known, that her biological cycle would align so precisely with this crucial moment. Now, as she observed her target through the windows, she felt her legendary control slipping. Morrison stood suddenly, moving to his desk. He began reviewing documents, his expression growing concerned as he made notes. Naira used her enhanced vision to zoom in on the papers. They were geological surveys of areas near their hidden facilities. He was getting closer to the truth. She raised her weapon, lining up the shot. One squeeze of the trigger, and her mission would be complete. She could return home before these biological urges completely overwhelmed her. But as she watched him work, watched him frown over reports of displaced communities and environmental damage, her hands began to shake. For the first time in her career, Naira lowered her weapon without taking the shot. She told herself it was tactical, better to wait, to learn more about what he knew. But as she retreated into the shadows, she couldn't ignore the way her skin hummed with awareness, or how her heart raced whenever she thought of those gentle brown eyes. This mission had just become far more complicated than anyone could have predicted. 3 days of surveillance had done nothing to ease Naira's condition. If anything, watching James Morrison had only intensified the symptoms of her mating cycle. She sat in her rented apartment, reviewing footage from the microdrone she'd planted around his flat, trying to ignore the fever burning through her veins. The target, she forced herself to think of him that way, was reviewing more geological surveys. Through her surveillance, she'd learned he was preparing a comprehensive report on mysterious land acquisitions and environmental changes near refugee camps. Her superior's anxiety suddenly made more sense. He was methodically connecting dots that should have remained scattered. A soft chime from her communicator interrupted her thoughts. Shadow 7, explain the delay. Commander Dex's voice carried a note of warning. Naira straightened, grateful he couldn't see her flushed skin through the audio transmission. Target's routine is inconsistent. I'm gathering intelligence to ensure clean execution. Your previous missions never required such thoroughness. A pause. Are you experiencing any biological interference? Her heart skipped. They knew about her cycle's timing, but she couldn't let them know how it was affecting her. Negative, Commander. All systems optimal. See that they remain so. The human must be eliminated before he presents his findings at next week's UN conference. Complete the mission within 48 hours, or we'll send Shadow 3 to handle both problems. The threat was clear. Naira ended the transmission and pressed her forehead against the cool window glass. Outside, rain fell on London streets, and she watched James emerge from his building, heading toward the local coffee shop where he often worked. Without conscious decision, she found herself following. The coffee shop was warm and fragrant with roasted beans. Naira chose a corner table, hiding behind a newspaper while keeping James in her peripheral vision. He ordered his usual, black coffee, no sugar, and settled at a table with his laptop. She couldn't help noticing how his brown hair fell across his forehead as he worked, or the way his shoulders moved beneath his simple blue sweater. A young woman approached his table, and Naira felt an unfamiliar surge of something. Jealousy. Ridiculous. The woman was asking about volunteer opportunities at the refugee center, and James's face lit up as he explained their programs. His passion for helping others radiated from every gesture, every smile. Can I get you anything else? Naira started, realizing a barista had approached her table. No, their interaction caught James's attention, and their eyes met across the room. Her breath caught. In all her surveillance, she hadn't been prepared for direct eye contact. Heat flooded her system, and her hands trembled slightly. James smiled politely and returned to his conversation, but Naira noticed his glance returning to her several times. She should leave. She was compromising herself, taking unnecessary risks. But her legs wouldn't cooperate. The young woman eventually left, and to Naira's horror, James gathered his things and approached her table. Mind if I join you? You seem interested in my work. His voice was warm, with a hint of amusement. What makes you say that? You've been watching me for the past 20 minutes. He sat down before she could object. I'm James Morrison. I work with international aid organizations. Naira's training screamed at her to withdraw, to maintain mission parameters. Instead, she heard herself say, Lyra Nash. The alias fell from her lips automatically, even as her skin prickled with awareness of his proximity. Beautiful name, he said, and something in his tone made her wonder if he knew it wasn't real. You have unusual eyes, Lyra. Almost silver in this light. She should kill him now. A simple touch to trigger the neurotoxin in her ring, and it would be over. Her hand moved across the table, trembling slightly. James reached out, concerned, and their fingers brushed. Lightning seemed to arc through her body at the contact. She jerked back, knocking over her untouched coffee. I have to go. She stood so quickly her chair scraped loudly against the floor. Wait, James called after her, but she was already pushing through the door into the rain. She ran until her lungs burned, finally collapsing against a brick wall in an empty alley. What was happening to her? In all her years of service, she'd never lost control like this. The mating cycle was supposed to create attraction to suitable members of her own species, not this. Not this overwhelming pull toward a human she was meant to eliminate. Her communicator chimed again. Shadow 7, we're detecting elevated biological signatures. Report to medical for evaluation. Naira closed her eyes, feeling raindrops mix with what might have been tears. Negative, command. Local interference with sensors. I'll complete the mission tonight. She ended the transmission before they could respond, knowing she'd just lied to her superiors for the first time in her career. The rain soaked through her clothes as she tried to steady her breathing, but all she could think about was the warmth of James's fingers against hers, and the genuine concern in his eyes when he'd reached for her. She had 47 hours left to kill him. Instead, she found herself wondering what would happen if she saw him again. The attack came without warning. Naira was observing James from across the street when she spotted the shimmer of an active camouflage field, technology that shouldn't exist on Earth. Shadow 3 had arrived early. James was leaving his office, absorbed in a phone call about the upcoming UN presentation. He didn't notice the ripple of displaced air moving toward him, or the faint gleam of a neural disruptor being raised. Naira moved without thinking. Her body collided with James just as an energy pulse crackled through the space where he'd been standing. They tumbled behind a parked car, his phone clattering across the pavement. What the? James began, but Naira pressed her hand over his mouth. Stay down if you want to live, she whispered, her silver eyes meeting his shocked brown ones. The mating fever surged at their proximity, but she forced herself to focus. When I say run, head for the underground station. Don't stop, don't look back. She pulled her own weapon, firing 3 rapid shots at the shimmer of movement. Shadow 3's camouflage flickered, revealing a tall figure in sleek combat gear. Pedestrians screamed, fleeing the scene. Run! Naira pushed James toward the station entrance. He hesitated for a split second, looking at her with a mix of confusion and dawning recognition. You're like them, he said softly. Then he ran. Shadow 3, she recognized Crix's distinctive fighting style, fired again. Naira rolled behind a mailbox, her heart racing. This isn't your mission, Crix. Command disagreed with your methods. His voice was cold, mechanical. The human dies. Then we discuss your biological contamination. Fury rose in her chest. How dare they question her judgment? How dare they send this emotionless creature after James? The thought of Crix harming him made her body temperature spike dangerously. She heard running footsteps, Crix pursuing James. Without hesitation, she vaulted over the mailbox and sprinted after them. The underground station was crowded with evening commuters. She spotted James on the platform just as Crix materialized behind him. Get down, she screamed. James dropped instinctively as she fired. The shot caught Crix in the shoulder, spinning him around. His return fire went wide, shattering a digital advertisement board. Panicked humans fled in all directions. Naira reached James, pulling him behind a pillar. There's another exit through the maintenance tunnel. We need to. Why are they trying to kill me? His voice was steady despite everything. Those gentle brown eyes studied her face intently. Why did you save me? Because. The words stuck in her throat. Because her mating cycle had somehow fixated on him. Because watching him had shown her a kind of humanity her people had forgotten. Because every time he was near, her whole being hummed with recognition of something she'd never known she was missing. Another shot splashed against the pillar. Later, she promised. Run now. They sprinted for the maintenance access door. Naira's enhanced strength made short work of the lock, and they plunged into dimly lit concrete tunnels. Their footsteps echoed as they ran, and she tried not to focus on the warmth of James's hand in hers. "Your eyes," he said between breaths. "I knew they were unusual when I saw you in the coffee shop. You've been watching me for weeks, haven't you?" "Yes. No point in lying now. Were you supposed to kill me too?" She stopped running, turning to face him. "Yes." Instead of fear, she saw curiosity in his expression. "But you didn't. Why?" Before she could answer, her communicator crackled. "Shadow 7, you are hereby classified as compromised. Termination protocols activated. Return to base immediately for biological purging." James stepped closer, and her whole body responded to his presence. "You're not well," he said softly. "You're burning up. It's complicated." She swallowed hard. "Your research, it threatens my people's operations on Earth. They've been secretly mining resources, using refugee crises as cover. Your report would expose everything. And you were sent to stop me." It wasn't a question. His hand reached up, touching her cheek. The contact sent sparks through her nervous system. But something changed. Everything changed. She leaned into his touch despite herself. "My species, we have a biological cycle. A mating drive that occurs every 5 years. It's supposed to draw us to compatible matches among our own kind. But instead..." She met his eyes. "Instead, I can't stop thinking about you." The maintenance tunnel filled with the sound of pursuit. Crix was coming. James took her hand again, his grip firm and sure. "Then let's find out why." Together. They ran deeper into the tunnels, and Naira felt something shift inside her. She'd crossed a line, betrayed her mission, her people, everything she'd ever known. But with James's hand in hers and her blood singing with both danger and desire, she couldn't bring herself to regret it. They had to find answers, about her unprecedented reaction to him, about her people's true activities on Earth, about whether there was any way to bridge the gap between their worlds. But first, they had to survive. The safe house was small but secure, a forgotten emergency shelter James knew through his humanitarian work. Naira paced restlessly, her silver eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. The mating fever had reached critical levels, making it difficult to think clearly. "Your temperature's still rising," James said, watching her with concern. He'd spent the last hour reviewing files on his laptop, the evidence he'd gathered about mysterious land acquisitions and environmental anomalies. "Is there anything I can do?" Naira shook her head, maintaining distance despite every cell in her body crying out for proximity. "Just, stay there. Please." Her voice was rough. "I've never heard of this happening before. Our mating drive isn't supposed to affect us this strongly, especially not toward other species. Yet here we are." James set aside his laptop. "Your people have been using humanitarian crises as cover for resource extraction. Creating disasters to mask their mining operations. All those refugees." His voice held more sadness than anger. "I didn't know." Naira stopped pacing. "We were told we were helping Earth, preparing it for eventual alliance. That the resources were payment for future technological advancement." She pressed her forehead against the cool concrete wall. "I believed them. Until you met me." There was a gentle teasing in his tone. "Until I watched you." She turned to face him. "Your kindness, your dedication to helping others, it made me question everything. Then this happened." She gestured to herself, to the fever burning through her veins. "It's like my own biology is rebelling against everything I was taught." James stood slowly. "Maybe it's not rebellion. Maybe it's revelation." Her communicator burst to life. "Shadow 7, this is your final warning. Return for purging or face termination. Your biological corruption cannot be allowed to spread. Before she could respond, James's laptop chimed with an incoming video call. He answered it, and a woman's face appeared on screen. James, you need to see this. Those geological surveys. I cross-referenced them with global refugee data. The pattern is incredible. Every major displacement crisis in the past decade corresponds with alien mining operations, he finished. I know, Rachel. And I have proof. He glanced at Naira. Living proof. Naira stepped into view of the camera, knowing she was burning bridges with every passing moment. I can confirm everything. And provide coordinates for active sites. The woman, Rachel, gasped. My God. James, the UN presentation. We'll have to wait, another voice cut in. Crix materialized from the shadows, weapon raised. This ends now. Naira moved faster than humanly possible, placing herself between James and the neural disruptor. No. We're exposing everything. Think carefully, Shadow 7. Crix's voice was eerily calm. Your biological readings are off the charts. You're not thinking clearly. Step aside, let me complete your mission, and command will be merciful during your purging. I've never thought more clearly. Naira felt James move behind her, his hand brushing her back. The contact sent waves of heat through her body, but it also steadied her. Our people are wrong, Crix. Look around you. Look at what we're destroying. Sentiment. Weakness. The human has corrupted you completely. Crix raised his weapon. Several things happened at once. Rachel's voice shouted, "Police are on their way," from the laptop. James pulled something from his pocket, a small camera, recording everything. And Naira's fever peaked, sending her to her knees. "Kill me if you must," she gasped. But the truth comes out either way. James knelt beside her, showing the camera to Crix. It's already uploading. Every word, every admission. Your choice now. Crix's finger tightened on the trigger. Naira looked up at him through the haze of fever, seeing not an emotionless killer but a reflection of what she'd once been. You feel it too, don't you? The wrongness of what we've done here. For a moment, no one moved. Then sirens wailed in the distance, and Crix's weapon wavered. Command, he spoke into his communicator. We have a situation. The UN conference room buzzed with tension. On the massive screens behind the podium, satellite images showed the true scope of the Stellarian mining operations. James stood steady as he presented, his voice carrying to every corner of the packed chamber. For 10 years, they manipulated global crises to hide their activities. Today, that ends. He gestured to the data scrolling across the screens. But this isn't just a story of exploitation. It's also a story of hope. Naira watched from the shadows of the balcony, her fever finally stabilized. The past week had been a blur of negotiations, revelations, and unprecedented diplomatic contact between Earth and Stellarian authorities. Her betrayal had forced both sides to the table. The Stellarian High Command believed they could take what they needed without consequences, James continued. They didn't count on their own people's capacity for change. For empathy. For love. Her heart jumped at the word. After her fever peaked, after Crix lowered his weapon and made his own choice to support them, the truth about her condition had become clear. She wasn't malfunctioning. She was evolving. Initial biological studies suggest that the Stellarian mating drive isn't just about reproduction, James explained to the assembly. It's about adaptation. Growth. In rare cases, it can transcend species barriers, creating connections that bridge worlds. Nature itself seems to be pushing us toward cooperation rather than exploitation. The evidence was undeniable. She wasn't the first Stellarian to experience cross-species attraction, just the first to embrace it publicly. Others had been purged, their experiences erased. But no more. We propose a new framework for Earth-Stellarian relations, James announced. Equal partnership. Shared resources. Cultural exchange. And a joint commitment to helping those displaced by past operations. Movement beside her caught her attention. Crix, now Earth's first official Stellarian diplomatic liaison, nodded in approval. You changed everything, he said softly. Your courage to choose love over duty, it started a revolution. Below, James was finishing his presentation. The future won't be easy. We have years of damage to repair, trust to rebuild. But we've seen that change is possible. That hearts can open. That love can bridge the stars themselves. His eyes found her in the balcony, and even at this distance, the connection between them hummed with power. She no longer tried to fight it. Later, as the sun set over New York, they stood together on the observation deck of the UN building. The vote was unanimous, James said, taking her hand. The new accords will be implemented immediately. And us? Naira turned to face him. The biological studies confirm that this connection, it's permanent. Are you ready for that? His answer was to pull her close, his lips finding hers in a kiss that sent starbursts through her nervous system. When they finally parted, he smiled. I've never been more ready for anything. Even though I was sent to kill you. She traced his jaw with trembling fingers. You were sent to kill me, he agreed. But you chose to love me instead. And that choice changed two worlds. Below them, the city lights began to twinkle like stars. Somewhere up there, Stellarian ships were preparing for their first official diplomatic landing. Refugee camps were receiving long overdue aid. And across both worlds, others like her were finally stepping out of the shadows, choosing love over duty, connection over division. Naira leaned into James's embrace, her silver eyes reflecting the dying sunlight. She had come to Earth as an assassin, only to find her true mission was something far more powerful, proving that love could evolve beyond all boundaries, even those between stars. So, James whispered against her hair, what's our next mission? She smiled, feeling the warm pulse of their connection. Living happily ever after seems like a good start. Above them, a shooting star streaked across the darkening sky, not a star at all, but a Stellarian ship beginning its descent. A new chapter was beginning, for them and for both their worlds. And it had all started with a simple choice, to love rather than kill, to protect rather than destroy. In the end, that choice had saved not just their lives, but their souls. And as night fell over Earth, Naira knew she would make the same choice again, 1,000 times over, across 1,000 stars.